Okay, so today's video I am going to be doing a box mold. Forever ago I did do making a matrix mold, and I had originally planned on doing this as like making one of my custom Funko Pops, but I don't have the footage of working on the Funko. I lost it or didn't save it or something happened, but I decided to take the footage that I do have and make it into a video. So since forever ago I did making a matrix mold with the Boba Fett helmet, I decided I would do this one, which is making a box mold with the Custom Funko Pop project. So, you know, kind of multitasking. I am using a foam core board. It's usually about a 1/4 inch thick, but you can get different thicknesses and different colors. It's 20 by 30 inches, about $5 at Michael's. And then I am just measuring and marking and cutting on one side, not on both sides, and then I can fold it really nicely and I don't have as many seams. It is also hot glued onto the base board, which is foam core as well, with just a little bit of metal rod. You can get that at like Hobby Town, Hobby Lobby. There are a bunch of little thicknesses, and that's basically going to be your pour spout, where you pour or inject your plastic into your mold. Then you will make your little box, hot glue it on. Use a lot of hot glue. You can also tape it around, use some duct tape. Make sure everything's nice and sealed so you don't spill silicone everywhere. Before you fully hot glue everything though, do mark it with a Sharpie. That will make it a lot easier when you're cutting it. It usually transfers onto your silicone mold. So later on when you're cutting it open, you know where that seam line is. So we're going to be making our mold with Mold Max 30 silicone rubber. It's good stuff. You can also get different numbers. There's also platinum silicone that's like a clear, and it's usually 100 to 10 by weight, so 100 grams to 10 grams of A and B. I will measure everything out in the same cup and then mix, lots and lots of mixing. You want to do a really good thorough job because this is going to be your silicone, this is going to be your mold. If you don't mix it up really well, you could end up with like a gummy spot where it doesn't fully set, and then your mold's ruined, and that's just a hot mess. So trust me, you want to mix it up really well. I actually sped this up a bunch, and then I'm popping it into my vacuum chamber. You can get that on Amazon. Mine is not available. It was a little bit wider than the one that I found, that I'll put up as like a little thing and put it in the description as well. And these are good to get all the air bubbles out of your mold. You don't necessarily have to use a vacuum chamber though. You can do a high pour. But yeah, this one's $140 on Amazon, and it's pretty much the same. I think mine's a 5-gallon and it's a little wider, but that was just like a basic 3-gallon. There's a whole bunch of different options. Causes all the pressure at the vacuum chamber and causes all the pressure to come out, so it causes all the air bubbles to be forced up to the top and pop and expand, and it gets the air bubbles out of your silicone. If you don't have a vacuum chamber, you can do a high pour. I just love watching the process, so we're just going to put that there. But you can do a high pour where basically you put the mold on the floor or your box on the floor and you pour it up from really high and really thin. So basically as it's coming down, all of that stretching is going to allow all those air bubbles to come out. And that's another way to do this process without this. But if you have one of these, it is really handy. I use it quite often when I'm doing molds. It bubbles up. It like goes up at least double its volume, maybe even 3 times, and then it drops back down, it sinks, and then it'll continue to bubble. Eventually it'll like kind of fully settle, but not 100%. I usually take it out once it goes back down to a certain level and then just kind of lingers there for about a minute or two. But yeah, so get all of your air bubbles out and then just pour that into your box molds. Now, since your piece is glued down, sometimes little air bubbles can get trapped underneath of your piece. As the silicone pours in, it doesn't get in there. So after you pour all your silicone in there, you should pick up your piece, put your hand, or use a piece of foam core on top and just kind of, or a piece of cardboard, and just rock it. You want to like let gravity get any air bubbles that got trapped underneath of your piece when you poured the silicone in to be able to come up. After I rock it, I'll usually give it a little tappy tap, try to help get those air bubbles that might have been trapped underneath out as well, or any little air bubbles that are still in there. Give it a good tappy tap. Again, if you don't have a vacuum chamber, you want to really do this process very thoroughly. I've seen people that take like a sander that's like on the table so it vibrates the table to help cause all the air bubbles to rise up to the top. There's lots of different tricks that I've seen, and rocking and tapping seem to be the best ways that I've seen. But you know, everybody's different. These are just the tips and tricks that I've learned. So after you do all of your rocking and your tapping, tappity tappity tappity, leave it alone for 24 hours, leave it alone overnight. And then you're just gonna let it sit overnight.
24 hours later.
After that, we will open up our molds. It is foam core board, so just rip it apart, throw it away. You don't need to save any of that. It's $5 for a big sheet. You'll be able to use plenty of it. And then I trim off the little excess so that the piece will lay flat with my scalpel. I also use my scalpel to help cut it open. When you get the scalpels at Amazon, be careful. They are very, very, very sharp. Do not cut yourself or anybody else. And then I do like a zigzag, a little pattern to help kind of key it in. And then after I do that, I use my ring pliers there that help open it, so when you squeeze it, it actually opens the piece up. And do like a zigzag, because you don't want a completely flat cut. You actually want to make ridges, so that way it kind of locks the piece together, because if it's flat, then the pieces will just slide. But if they're ridged, then the pieces can't slide. They'll lock into place better. So after you do all that, you get the piece fully cut open along the seam line. Usually you'll mark the piece as well as the box, and then that line kind of transfers very lightly over to your silicone mold. Follow that line with your razor blade as you're going very slowly. You can see the line there on the piece. And then after you get all of your molds popped open, you will mark them, because trust me, you don't want to lose them. And put a little baby powder in there. Make sure you're wearing a mask when you do this part, because you don't want to die. Kind of knock it out, and then I'll usually use an air compressor, an air hose, and kind of blow it out. After that, you rubber band them shut. Then we will do some liquid plastic. I'm using Smoothcast 300. You can get different kits. There's also 325, works great. The color match. There's a lot of different kinds. And then I will usually get all of the plastic that I need, A and B, for my project out at one time. Even though I'm going to be pouring little bits at a time, I'll weigh them all out at the same time and have my 2 cups off to the side. So A and B. It is 100, 100. Some are 190s. There's different variations depending on weight on the different plastics. So always check whatever you're buying. And then mix it together. It will set really fast once you've mixed them together, so you don't have much time. Where the silicone, you do have a lot more time to work with this. This stuff is going to set a lot faster. Mix it up really well, inject it in there, put it in the pressure pot, put the lid on, blast the air in there, and then let it sit for like 10 to 15 minutes inside the air compressor. Just don't touch it for a good 15 minutes. So I'm injecting to help this process come along a little quicker. If you don't have a pressure pot like I do, you might not want to do as many molds at once as I'm doing. Then I'll make sure to kind of top them off after I put them in there. That one that is on the table is actually a slush mold, so I'm like slushing the plastic that's in there. So as you see, I kind of keep rotating it while I'm doing the other one. So I've got some that I'm putting into the pot, and I have some that one that I'm doing is a slush cast. If you don't have a pressure pot and an air compressor, you can just inject them in, kind of smack them, and hope that you don't get many air bubbles. You probably will. Baby powder does help kind of get a good coating, so you get less air bubbles, but it still can happen. A pressure pot and an air compressor, you can get a lot more of the air bubbles out of your actual castings. So that is one of the banes of existence on casting stuff up. But yep, then I'm doing a slush cast. Because I am doing a slush cast, they're usually really thin. The first couple of layers, you don't get like a solid, good, thick layer. So I usually do about 4 to 5 thin slush casts. So we got the first one, it's almost set. So I'm actually adding in the second one. You don't want to let it fully set, not 100%. I mean, you can, but you do risk the chances of the layers coming apart. Where if you let it set about 90 to 95% when you add the next layer in, they have a better chance of adhesion and like actually gripping together. So I'll kind of keep an eye on the first cup as I mix it together and see where it is on its stage and kind of look in the mold if I can to see where it is at its stage of setting. Once it's starting to turn white, mostly turning white, add in your next layer. The ones that are in there have been in there for long enough that I can pop them out, but I'm still going to kind of let them sit while I finish off with the other one. I'm checking the cups, add them all in there, and mix up the next batch. Like I said, I will do about 3 or 4 slush casts, and I usually keep a Sharpie on my table so I can mark the mold for whichever layer I left kind of sitting last, because whatever's at the bottom is going to be the thickest layer, so I want to make sure I don't constantly keep setting it on the same side and having just one really thick layer. Having 4 even sides is going to be best. With the bottom, I will do a final pour and then either put it on top of another mold so it's flat and kind of sitting so that hopefully the plastic doesn't leak all out. I've also taken old silicone that I had and I kind of cut one so it's a little bit of a plug piece and then flip it over, and it might ooze out a little bit, but usually not too bad. Then I just let that set. After it's set for about 20 minutes or so, pop open that mold. I don't have too big of a mess. Sometimes I will. You can notice I do have plastic down there, so I don't make a giant mess.
20 minutes later.
It still will be like hot, warm. If it's hot, let it sit for another minute or two. But it'll still be warm, and when it's like that, it's still kind of soft. So I'll usually clean up a little bit of the excess plastic that is in the seams or on the inside pour area. You'll usually end up with like a bit of plastic that kind of set weirdly. So while it's still soft, perfect time to clean it up fully and go around to those seams. Make sure not to squeeze your piece too hard. You don't want to warp it because, like I said, it is still soft. So you want to make sure you kind of just hold it and don't squeeze too hard while you just clean up a little bit and go around. Set it down, let it sit for a little while longer. Then after about an hour or so, it'll be cool.
1 hour later.
After about an hour, it will be cool to touch. It's not going to be hot anymore. And then it's fine to work with. You're not going to like bend it and warp it. So then you can go around and you clean up all of your seams and clean up your pour spout and any places where you're going to be attaching pieces. Like I said, this is a Funko Pop. So the bottom piece where the head piece goes in is going to be attached here. So I'm making sure to clean this up real nice. And then that is the piece that's going to get attached in there, and that needs sanded down nicely. After it's all sanded down and cleaned up nice and nice, then I will be able to pop that one in. But yeah, I got to go around, sand the bottom that you'll see sticking out, and then sand that inner seam where it's going to lock in there. Try and test fit it a couple of times. You don't usually want to, take away too much, but you want it just enough that it sits in there nicely. And sometimes you gotta clean up the plastic just a little bit more. Seems not quite right. Sometimes your casting's like perfect and it just fits in there exactly. You don't have to do nothing. Maybe just a little tighty on the seam. But yep, once you can get your piece all nicely popped in there, yeah, then you can glue it in. Then, like I said, we have those separate little pieces, and I will use some super glue. You can get it like Hobbytown, Michael's, probably at Joann's, Amazon. And I like that little pack. It comes with like thin, medium, thick, and then zip kicker. It is a little kicker that helps set off the super glue faster, but it will cause it to kind of bubble sometimes, so it's not the best to use. It's just if you need a really fast adhesion. Once everything is all set, then clean up that seam. You can Bondo. Metal glaze is an amazing Bondo. It's a little less porous than normal Bondo, and that's great for cleaning up your really bad cracks, your scratches, your divots, but it's a little more pricier than Bondo. Bondo works. So after you have it all cleaned up and assembled, then you will primer it. I actually forgot to record a little step here where you do a little spritz of the primer and then give it like kind of an acetone wipe down and then spritz it again with the primer. It actually helps the adhesion a little bit better. Like it opens up the pores of the plastic to grip a lot better. So after you primer it, just let it sit for 24 hours.
The next day.
Then you can go ahead and start painting. This Funko Pop was actually a mailman Funko Pop that I had made a couple, so I decided let's just go ahead and get it molded up. I am using Tamiya paints. You can get those at Hobbytown, Hobby Lobby, different prices for different colors, and I'm using my Iwata Airbrush. And then the next day, I use my Cricut vinyl cutter to cut out the decals for the eyes and the eyebrows. It's actually the easiest way to get a perfectly symmetrical and even eyebrows and eyes. You can hand paint them, but man, I have found doing the decals is way easier. Then I masked off all the flesh and painted the hat.
The next day.
Because the hat, I wanted a nice, smooth, even surface of the paint. You can hand paint it, but usually you'll get like some brush strokes here and there. Where with the hat, I just wanted a nice even coating. So I masked everything off and airbrushed that on. And then we have to peel up the masking. You want to be very, very careful while you're peeling up your masking not to scratch your original base paint because, man, it sucks to try and do touch-ups when you're like 80% done. Then I'm just using a chopstick there to help hold the head on there while I set up a hand paint on the hair. I do hand paint on lots of things, but certain areas it's just easier to use a decal and an airbrush. And you know, why not use the tools that you have available? I have these tools I've collected over the years, so I'm going to use them. But yep, you want to be very, very, very careful after all of this painting you've done. Cleaning it off and restarting at this point is extremely frustrating. So go very slowly. If we do get more orders of this particular Funko Pop, then I have the mold and the casting already. And actually, molding the head was really smart because there's a lot of people that wear baseball caps. And so having a Funko Pop male with the baseball cap just as a base head in general is really smart. And there's our finished little mailman. You can get your own little mailman. I hope you enjoyed how to make a box mold, how to cast up plastic castings, and how I painted that Funko Pop's head. Because I didn't show you the rest, I just showed you the head. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to this point, you should put this emoji in the comments or just tell me about your favorite Funko Pop or how your day's going, what's your plans for the weekend, whatever you feel like telling me. Just put it in the comments. It helps the engagement. All that stuff. Like and subscribe if you want or if you haven't already. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye, bye, bye.